Hello, good people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here, we learn, we connect, and we grow. When you are building financial models in Excel, it makes it easy if you have a dynamic template that you can use to create your layout. It gives you that same consistent feel page on page. It also makes it flexible enough to accommodate any inputs that you put in your model. So in a short video, I'm going to walk you through how you can create that in Excel in just a few minutes. If you are game, join me and let's go through this together. Okay, so here is a sample model for Finance Skills Hub. This is the cover page and I have my summary page. So the summary page is more like a dashboard to give me the key indicators, right? Now, I can switch between the key indicators, revenue, EBITDA, net income to common shareholders and all that. Apart from that, I can also set the scenarios. So this is the worst case scenario for the assumptions that I have put in. I have base case here. Okay, I have best case and all that. Now, this is possible because I have a consistent layout. If you look through the pages here, my assumptions, okay, you realize that the same settings, the same formatting theme that I've used in the pages, okay, are used in here. If you're able to do this at a go, you can now replicate it for the rest of your pages. If you change any inputs as well, these also updates your outputs, right? So in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how to put it together from scratch. That template that you can use to create the rest of the pages for that consistent, flexible feel. So let's start the journey. Okay, so I have a new workbook, one new worksheet here. So we are first going to create the cover page. So the cover page basically contains the date you built the model, the name of the client, and sometimes a label to indicate the timeline in the financial model, right? But in this cover page, we also use it as a base case to set the initial layout for our model. So I can have the font type set here, the column width and all those things. Okay, so in this worksheet, I'm going to select A. I'll use a lot of shortcuts here. You know, financial modelers use a lot of alt keys. So, but I'll show you before I execute. So here, I want to format the column width. Okay, so alt H O W. Okay, will bring me here. I'll set this to 2. Okay, so this reduces that. Now, you also realize that in the model, a lot of the inputs, the longer labels, are put in column B. Okay, so we usually set this a bit wider. So I'll set column B, Alt HOW, okay, to 50. Okay, so this gives me that. Now, the rest of the columns, that is from C to P, okay, are used for inputs and then also for the actual and forecast numbers. So the whole model actually ends at column P. So I'll highlight C all the way to P. Now this depends on the kind of model you are doing, right? And then set this one to a column width of 10, right? Now for navigation purposes, it makes sense to hide the columns that you don't need. So I'm going to go all the way to the end. Okay, control close bracket to hide this. Okay, so now that I have this in P, if I come back to A, it helps if you have all your columns visible, right? So currently I can't see P, so I'm going to highlight Control Shift right, okay, Control Backspace to reset this. Now with this with selected or selection, I can now come to View, okay, and zoom to selection, right? The shortcut for that is Alt W G, right? So Alt WG will now bring all my columns. Sometimes it just zooms it so that you can see all the columns in there. So this is going to be the cover page. But while we are here, I'm going to set this, okay, to the fonts that I use for modeling. So that is Sego UI. Okay, so that is the font type. And then I'll make the font size 9. Okay, so that's throughout. This is going to be the dominant font type and font size. Okay, now in the model, you realize that we had our dates. Okay, we also had the name of the client, and then we had the extra label financial model for whatever period also here. So I've selected these, holding control, right? Now I'm going to increase the font size for just these 3 cells to 18. Okay. Now, if I now do this, I come to B7, I can enter the date. You can make it dynamic or you can input it. So for today's date, control semicolon brings this here. Okay. I can format it as a proper date, control shift hash. Okay. The name of the client here is Finance Skills Hub. Okay, and this is a financial model for the period 2020-2027. Okay, so at this point, I can highlight the whole of this and then align it Alt-H-A-L to the left. Right? You can just even bold in this to make it easier for your clients to see. Okay, now one important aspect is if you look at the financial model, especially the financials, these numbers are formatted consistently. So we have it set to 1 decimal place accounting format, right? We can do this again ahead of time. So I can select I, okay, go all the way to P, okay, and over here you realize that if I click on this, I get that accounting format. Alt shortcut is Alt-HK, okay. So at this point, if I put in any number, okay, it reads like this. So while this is selected, I can now reduce the font size to Alt-H9 to reduce it to 1 decimal place. So all the numbers that come here will now be formatted correctly. Okay, so I can now delete this. So this remains my cover page. At this point, I can take off my grid lines, Alt-WVG. Okay, then this is good enough to be carried on. So I'm going to rename the worksheet, right? It's under format, rename worksheet here. So the shortcut for that is Alt-HOR. So I have this as cover, right? So this is the base for the rest of the layout. Now we are going to duplicate. So to duplicate, you click inside the name, hold Control, and then gently drag it to the right. It creates a cover for you. Right, now I can take these off, 7, 9, and 11, Control minus to delete this. Okay, now you realize that when I come to the assumptions page, I have this banner here. The banner actually helps us know the name of the worksheet we are in, the scenario we have selected, the client name, any other details that you want to consistently display throughout the pages, you can put it in the banner. So in my case, I have the name of the client, the scenario I've selected, and the worksheet I am in. Okay, so we are going to put this here. So I'll select B2, 2B4, Control Shift right to go all the way to the end. Right, I'm going to fill this with a blue color. So Alt-HH, okay, and then I'll put in this blue color here. Now, while this is selected, I'm going to change the font to Alt-HFC, okay, and then choose a white font here. So at this point, everything that you type here is white, right? Now let's put in that dynamic label for the title of our model. So I'll put in an equal to, come to my cover, and then select the name of the client, right? Now look in the formula bar, I'm going to join this, okay? So Finance Skills Hub, okay? And then bring a double quote, as at a colon, close double quote, okay, as at this date. So I'm going to put or join it with this date. Now the problem is if I directly select this date, it is going to give me the generic value of a date, which is a number, right? So before I do that, I want to introduce a function text to help me format this properly. So I'll select this value, okay, bring a comma, and then the format I'm going to use here is dd-mmm-yy, and then I'll close my double quotes and close this. Right, now if I press enter, I get this dynamic display, Finance Skills Hub as at this date. Okay, now here we are able to select the scenario we've chosen in the model at any point in time, but we haven't created that yet. So I'm going to jump to the name of the worksheet we are in. Again, that is dynamic, right? So at this point, it will help if you save your file. So I'm going to save this file. Okay, so I'll save it in my downloads. The reason I'm saving this file, so I'll save this in my downloads, and then I'll call this sample financial model. Okay. Okay, now the reason I save the file is that we generate that dynamic label, which always brings the name of the worksheet. Okay, it is important we have a file name. Okay, so we saved it to create that file name. Now, if you do that, a simple function called cell, okay, allows you to generate the file name that you are in. So if I select this, it just tells me that this is the path for this current Excel workbook. Now, you'll notice that what we are actually interested in is the name after the closing square bracket, right? So if I can get a formula that always grabs whatever is after the closing square bracket, then that is my current worksheet name. Okay, so we're going to use a function called replace. So replace is going to take the formula I just did, which is cell file name. Okay, the reference is optional, but sometimes it makes it easier to reference the current cell. Okay, so this is actually going to bring me the whole of the file name, right? Now, starting from 1, okay, I want to return this number of characters. But before I return the number of characters, I need to know the position of the closing square bracket. Okay, so here I'm going to use find. Okay, so use find, open square bracket, and then put in the closing square bracket. So it's going to find this one within that's original file name. So I'm going to repeat the cell file name formula. Okay, and then reference this again. So I'll close this. I'll leave the start number as optional. It will always start from 1. Now, if it determines the position of the square bracket, I want it to replace all the characters before that with a blank. Okay, so that is what I'm putting in here. So when I do that and then I press enter, now I'm left with the ending part after the square bracket. So let's see if this works. So if I change this to assumptions, okay, you realize that this updates, that also updates. Okay, so it is this formula we are going to take. So I'm going to copy the whole of this, Control C, and then paste it here. All right, so now at this point, we now have this. Okay, so if I change this to input, okay, and you realize that this is going to work. Right. So this is going to play a role as when we finish the first page and it's a template, as we copy, any sheet name we change automatically updates in there. Now we tampered with our zoom level, so here we'll have to go back. I select A, Control Shift all the way to P, come back here, Alt W, okay, and then G for zoom to selection. So we are back here. So now that we finished this, let's now create our timeline. Right. So our timeline has these labels: the period start, the period end, the period counter, and the basing period. Sometimes when you are modeling, it helps to have all these inputs on standby. You will use them in several portions of your model, right? So I'm going to lay this out. So I have so I'm going to just copy this, right? And then paste this here. So this is my period start, my period end, my period counter, and days in period. Now, because I always want to keep this banner in view, right? At this point, I will freeze the pane. So standing in A10, Alt W for view, okay, and then F for freeze panes, another F to select the freeze panes. So that if I go down, okay, all this stays. Okay, now there are some labels that are universal in your model. Example, the scenarios that you have selected, it applies to all the pages. The stats of your model, that one is also universal. For some of these universal labels, we want to place them here. We'll call them scenarios and model controls, right? So that is what we are going to do next. So we'll come here and I'm going to call this scenarios. Now, if you take a close look at this, this is set in a typical heading 1 style. So the color is a bit different, the line is also different. It is that same consistent feel you have for model controls. So it then means that all your headers will have the same thing, right? Let's learn how we create this. So I have selected scenarios, okay? I'll highlight the whole of this. Now, if I highlight the whole of this, what I want is to color this, okay, with a deeper shade of blue, okay, and then bolding this as well, right? And then for the line, I'm going to use the border lines here and then go and then click more. So the shortcut for that is Alt HB, okay, and then M will bring me here. See, so when this pops up, okay, the line that I want is this line, and then I'm maintaining the same color, so I'll choose this, right, and then I'll now apply this single line here, and then click OK. Okay, so this is the setting for my heading 1. Now we want to load this in memory as a cell style, right? So under cell styles, okay, I can choose new cell style, right, and then name this heading 1. Right. So it means that anytime I want to create this heading 1 style, it's available here for me to just pick and then apply. Okay, so now that we've done our scenarios, we can now put in the scenario selected. Okay, so this is my scenario selected. Okay, I also have what we call scenario index. Okay, so these two will help us always select the scenario and then change the output, right? Now, the same thing that we did for scenarios, we are going to do for scenario names. If you look at that, we are using that as a typical heading too, right? So yeah, I'm going to leave a space and then call this scenario names. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the whole of this. Now, the color I'm going to choose for this is the next shade of blue. Okay, I'm going to bold in this, right? And then the line, as you saw earlier, Alt HBM. So again, if I come here, I'll choose the same line, but the shade is going to be that shade, the lighter blue, and then I'll put in this line and then I'll click OK. Okay, so I'm going to save this as a cell style. So Alt H J, this pops up, and then N for new style. I'm going to call this heading 2. So I can use this later when I want. Now, for these scenario names, I have base case, best case, and worst case. So I'm going to just paste them here. Okay. Now that we have this, let's see how we can create the model controls using the same method. So my model controls is here. Now I don't have to go through the process again because I've saved the formatting as heading 1. So when I highlight this, okay, I can go to cell styles and then just choose heading 1, and then it just applies it like that. So this saves you time, right? And then now we want to create our timeline. So our timeline has actual start date, forecast start date, right? Then we can put in our assumptions, which is in the standard assumptions color, which is blue. Then there's also a general label for number converter. We use this to change the denomination of our numbers in some parts of the model. Then there's also circuit breaker to reset the model if there's an error or it breaks. And then we have something for inflation as well, but let's just use these labels for now. So I have these ones, I'll copy and then paste these ones here. Now, here, the column in C is going to be for units, okay? Column in D is for my inputs, and then column in E is the scenario that I have selected. Okay, so I'll have this in the top line. So Alt HAC to center align this, Control B. Okay, so I have that. Now, standard practice is that when you are creating inputs in your model, it has to be in blue, right? So we can set the background with this gray color, okay, and then Alt HBM, come here, and then choose this next shade of gray, and then this outline for the border, right? Now for the font, if I come here and I go to more colors, okay, Okay, I have 00255, which is the standard color for this. Okay, so it means if I type in any number here, okay, this is what I get. We'll load this again as a cell style, right? So just as we did, I'll come here, okay, and then load this as a new cell style. I'll label this general. Okay, now let's say I want to do some inputs for scenario selected, scenario index, okay, my number converter, and then my circuit breaker. Right? I can just go and apply this general format here, okay, and then I just have that in here. Now, the actual start date for this model is 1st January 2020. Okay, this I can format as a date. Copy this down. The forecast start date starts 3 years after. So this is 1st January 2023. It is these inputs I'm going to use to create my timeline. Right, so my timeline starts from here. So you realize that if I stand here, okay, this takes that actual date and then moves it on year. But I also have the end of year date here, and then the period counter we normally use this in calculations, and the days in the period is also here. Then I have this label here to give me whether it's actual or forecast. It's also dynamic, right? So in this case, what it means is that even if you delete, right, these ones, it resets, and then you are able to get a dynamic timeline. So let's learn how we created this. So standing in I, in the period start, what I'm going to say is that if the cell to my left contains a number, here I've just selected the cell, okay, then bring the dates below it and then add +1, right? Otherwise, bring this actual start date. I'm going to lock this absolutely, right? And then I'll close this. So this gives me the start date, which is 1st January. Now, the end of the year for this particular date, right, is technically 11 months away. So I'm going to use EO month, start date, and then add 11 months to this. Okay, so this one I format gives me 31st December 2020. Right. My period counter is this blank cell +1. So I'll format this general, and then the number of days I have in here is this minus that +1. So this gives me 366. Okay. Then for the label, is it actual, is it forecast? Again, I can use an if statement here. Let me just drag this out. So here I'll say that if this particular date, okay, is less than my forecast date, okay, so here I'll lock this F4 as well, right? Then the label should read actual, otherwise it should read forecast. And then I'm going to close this. So this is the full set for our timeline. Alt-HAC, align this, take it all the way to P, Control-R, and then I have my actual here and then my forecast, right? So these 2 days control my timeline. Okay, now let's quickly fill in this part. So the scenario selected can be any of these scenario names. So the scenario I've selected here can be any of these 3 names. So I'll do a data validation, Alt-DL. Okay, take my list. This is going to be my source, and then highlight these 3. Okay, so I can select any of these. So for example, this is going to be base case. If I select the base case, I need an index, which is just a number that matches the position. So this is my lookup value. This is my lookup array. And then this, I'm going to choose an exact match for this. So again, I have this. Now the reason I created this is to help us create a dynamic label. So here I can join this label scenario selected. Okay, look in the formula bar, you see that I've joined this, okay, with a column, close the quotation mark, and then join this with the scenario that I have selected. Right, now if I press enter, so anytime I select a particular scenario, this updates, right? So technically, I now have my full template laid out, right? Now with this layout, you can now copy or duplicate it for the rest of your pages. So I'm going to now drag this to the right, okay, and then label this as my template. Okay, so realize that this updates to template. Then I'm going to delete the whole of these, right? So now this will temporarily show as an error. No problem. We are going to link it back to the original page, okay? So at this point, I'll highlight the whole of this, okay? Hold Control and then select these two. And then this is now my active cell, right? So I'll put in an equal to here, okay? And then go to my inputs page and then select this active cell here and then press Control Enter, right? So with this, we now have this template to create the rest of our pages. So as an example, if I want to use this template to now create, let's say, my schedules, okay, I can just hold this, duplicate, right? The numbers and everything stays. Now, if I name this schedules, okay, you realize that I have my schedules here, right? It's still linked up here. If I now duplicate this and I call this my financials, okay, again, I have it here. So if you like, at the end of the day, you can hide this template, but the whole idea is that when you complete your model, right, it is these pages that will give your user a very consistent view, okay? It also controls your scenarios, okay, as well as the inputs that you are going to use in your model. So hopefully you were able to pick some few lessons from here for your financial model, right? Please practice and add what you've learned to your Excel tricks and financial modeling tricks as well. Thanks for watching.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.